This document, this collection of documents you have in your lap, the Bible, is incredible, and you can demonstrate that it is of extraterrestrial origin. Its origin is from outside our time domain. And I want to give you some examples of things to help demonstrate that this morning. One of the questions that we often get asked is, are there hidden messages in the Bible? And there's a lot of nonsense published in that area, but yes, there are. In fact, Solomon tells us it is the glory of God to conceal a thing, and the duty and honor of kings to search out a matter. So we're going to explore some of those things this morning. Well, as we read our Bible, we really get enchanted with, of course, the first two chapters is the creation. That's pretty exciting stuff. You get to chapter 3, that's the seed plot of the whole Bible, is rooted in chapter 3. Chapter 4 is the murder of Abel by Cain, and you know that story. From chapter 6 on, we have the flood of Noah, and there's a lot of action there. So the book of Genesis is a very exciting, action-filled book. When we get to Genesis chapter 5, it's one of those chapters you'd like to skip. It's just a genealogy. And if you're in a reading plan, you'd like to sort of skip over that, get into the interesting stuff. No, Genesis 5. What is it all about? Well, it's a genealogy of 10 people. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Yared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. See, the problem with that list, it's not translated for you. That is transliterated. Those are approximations of how they were pronounced. I wonder what might lie behind these other names. Let's see if we can go through this a little bit. That name Adam is pretty straightforward. That comes from Adamah, which means man. No problem with that one. He's followed by a son by the name of Seth. The word Seth means appointed. And how do we know that? Because Eve tells us that in the previous chapter. Eve said when he was born, "For God hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew." He has a son by the name of Enosh. Now this is a heavy name to go around with. The word Enosh means mortal, frail, or miserable. Can you imagine having him on a sports team? Hey, miserable, you're on our team. You know? It doesn't really work, especially in school, I imagine. Okay. And it comes from the root, anash, which means incurable. It's usually used of a wound or grief or woe or sickness, something like that. Kenan now, not Canaan, Kenan can mean sorrow, dirge, or elegy. Don't confuse it with Canaan. Balaam in Numbers 24 develops a pun on his name. It's another whole story. But Kenan means sorrow. These are pretty heavy names, miserable and so forth. So when Kenan has a son, he decides enough's enough. So he names his son, when he's born, a mouthful but a wonderful name, Mahalalel. And Mahal, which means blessed or praised one, and El, the name for God. Mahalalel, kind of hard to pronounce, but what a great name, quite a contrast to his elders. The blessed God is what his name means. He names his son Yared, and there's a story behind that I'll spare you here, but the name Yarad, which simply means shall come down. And that may have a connection with Genesis 6, but that's a whole another story. That brings us to Enoch. We've mentioned already, but what does the word Enoch mean? It turns out that Enoch is an academic phrase which means commencement, or in more narrow, teaching. Enoch suggests teaching, if you will. And then, of course, he has Methuselah, which I've mentioned means that Muth and Shalak really mean his death shall bring. The year that Methuselah dies is indeed the year the flood came. That brings us to Lamech. Now, here's a case where the root word is still in our English language. And we see it evident in the word English lament or lamentation, if you will. In the Hebrew, the word Lamech suggests despairing. Fair enough. Now, Lamech has a son by the name of Noah, and he's derived from Nacham, which means relief, to bring relief or comfort. And we know that from his father, mentions that. Lamech says in chapter 5, says, he called his name Noah, saying, "This same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands because of the ground which the Lord hath cursed." Okay, So here's our genealogy now. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Yared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. That's a rough way they might pronounce it. Let's translate it with what we've learned. Well, Adam means man. Seth, appointed. Enosh, mortal. Canaan, sorrow. Mahalalel, the blessed God, shall come down, teaching that his death, whose death? God's death, shall bring the despairing comfort or rest. Man is appointed mortal sorrow. Man is appointed mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down, teaching that his death, whose death? God's death, shall bring the despairing comfort or rest. Staggering discovery here, tucked away in the genealogy of Noah. This tells you several things. It tells you that God's plan of redemption was not a knee-jerk reaction to a surprise that Adam sinned. He knew he would from the beginning. Before the creation, he appointed those that would be saved. When did God first have his mind on you? Ephesians 1:4, before the foundation of the world. God knew, he knew it would take a display of infinite love to remedy the situation, that nothing less than the death of God himself would avail to pay for the wickedness of sin. But the other thing about this that you learn, well, there's no way you'll ever convince me that a group of Jewish rabbis contrived to hide a summary of the Christian gospel tucked away in a genealogy in the Torah? No way. No way. And yet here it is.